Hi there guys, today I wanted to do a different type of video. Instead of actually having a look at something or giving my thoughts, this time I wanted to make a video for things that I would like to be changed or amended if or when there is a sequel to Rebirth. I hope in some ways this video might be useful to some people to sort of give them an idea of things that I was kind of a bit frustrated weren't in the game to start with. So obviously the first thing to touch on is the ship itself, and having one player ship, I know some people are okay with it, but myself I think it opens up a lot of problems. The first being that basically because this ship has to take on every other ship, including destroyers and little ships, it can be a bit overpowered for its size. We should be able to change ships. That's something that does need to be changed, I think, in the sequel. We don't have to do it in the same scale as Terran Conflict and Albion Albatron. In them games we had something like 200-300 ships which you could switch between. It would just be, for me, okay if the sequel had, say, 4 or 5 ships, although each of the ships vary in size. So you might have one of the first ships obviously you start with might be a scout, and then you might have a sort of medium or light fighter, and then obviously medium, heavy, possibly a corvette. I don't know about destroyer because they're not exactly the most fun ships, but they could at least have 4 or 5 different size ships. And on top of that, I'd like to see the ships being able to be customised much more. Instead of having a fixed weapons where each one, including the capital ships, each ship should have a bit like X3, Albion Albatron, and that is where you can have gun mounts and fit what you like. I think that is something that needs to come back, as well as, like I said, the various ships, so to give you a bit more range. Probably the next thing I kind of think is the interiors, because quite honestly the interiors don't really make a lot of sense. I think there was something they planned to do and it basically took too much resources, so they kind of done it half-heartedly.
This is the Albion Skunk, requesting permission to dock.
Allow pilot dock.
So, for example, if the interiors were a lot more detailed and varied, then I think they could add them in sequel, but I think if they sort of bring them back in the sort of style like this, then I don't think they're worthwhile for us. One thing I may have liked to seen, but it's got its negatives and positives, is to, when you used to in Albion Albatron board ships, it would have been nice to be actually have this type of first-person shooting actually with your Marines, so you could actually do something rather than just listening to your Marines boarding the ship. Like I said, I mean, they could do it well in different decks, so you get to obviously deck the first deck and then you do the next, like exactly the same as like it was done in the script version, but you could actually be with them. However, like I said, the drawback could be that some people who do like space sims don't want a first person shooter style game, so there's a plus and negative on that point. Myself, I would prefer to see inside the ships. Like I said, in that case, like I said, they don't have to go too detailed with all the levels and that. So yeah, that's the interiors. Another point with the ships I'd like to have seen is customization in the actual layout as well, not just the guns. So for example, this ship here, these could be modules. We could have a crew quarter module, a cargo bay module, and obviously a cockpit module, which are interchangeable and give us various different advantages. So we could change the cargo module to a bigger one and obviously trade with cargo, or we could change the cockpit. Obviously they kind of do that, but it could be part of a module and you could customize your ship again. The next thing I'd like to see changed in a sequel would be trading. Now, to me, the trading is utterly baffling, really. It should be made simple, and that's my motto for the trading. that you go to a station, you land, you pick up the goods, stick them in the cargo bay, fly into another place, you dock, you trade. I don't like the idea of commanding ships to do the job. It doesn't really make sense. Like I said, maybe later in the game the ships could be intelligent themselves. Well, not the ships, but you could get crew like they kind of do in here, and they could go off and trade for you. You shouldn't have to put up with all this wing crap and telling things where to go and stuff like that. So onto my kind of another point. Well, not onto. I was going to say my last point. Sorry, is kind of highways. Now, I don't kind of like the idea of highways at all. To me, they kind of make space look messy. You have this nice area with stations, and then you have this sort of, well, not here, but usually green pipes all over the place, which to me just kind of looks messy, and I don't think space needs it. The other thing what I don't like with these highways is that because they're in certain positions, they give structure to a almost sort of an area that shouldn't be structured. For example, space is a big open area. When we put sort of pathways to places, then suddenly this open area, it changes from an open area obviously to a more confined universe. I don't like the idea, because space should feel free and open, which again goes in with the thing of the one ship. I mean, it sort of kind of forces you into a specific area. So yeah, if they looked at them points, that would make, in my eyes, the game a lot better. From the modding side, I would have liked to have seen them use a common modern program, a graphical program, so that the communities, what's about at the moment, can actually still make models and ships and introduce them into the game. Obviously, with the swapping of ships, it would allow people like to put ships onto Steam Workshop, and then you could fly them. Obviously, like I said, it would have some sort of way they could put it so it costs money, not in real money but in-game money as such, to buy these other ships and things. So it could be sort of somewhat balanced. Maybe they could do the cost based on certain modules or something, so it could be that these modules don't, these player-made ships don't give an unfair advantage for people who just want to play the game, so they fit in nicely. So yeah, probably one of my other points, it kind of touched on it earlier, is the weapons. Like I said, I don't like if a player ship like this has kind of one weapon it can fire at a time. It should have a kind of a multiple, what do they call, gun mounts, where you can fire different ones. But again, I wouldn't like the return of Albion Albatron in that, where we have 8 gun banks or more, and we basically fire everything. I think in Albion Albatron what they should have done with that is they should have limited the maximum guns that could be fired to something like 2 or something on a ship, and then making you switch between different banks, because they had all that in place, and that could come back over, I would think. With the universe and galaxy itself, like I said, obviously the highways I would like to be removed. Possibly what they could do is, instead of using highways, is to use things more like jump beacons, where we come into a specific area. SETA, I think in all honest respect, SETA is better, it's quite good, than highways. Although I can understand from a technical point why it was kind of removed. Making a script or AI run at 10 or 10 times faster than it should does lead to quite a lot of problems. I mean, you could kind of do it like Elite does and go into a sort of fast travel. I mean, it's not ideal, but I'm not too sure on that. But again, that could go with the freedom sort of space, opening it up a bit more and feeling you going into an area that's unknown. I definitely would like to see in-game content changed. end game content. Like I said, I don't know if the lot's changed there myself, but there should be areas that are just filled up with enemies, and to go there is complete suicide, but you kind of try and survive. Obviously we had these in Albion Albatron with the Xenon sectors. Like I said, that kind of was here, but I felt they were kind of lacking. Again, like I said, we should, with the one player ship thing removed, we should feel we can build up our money, working our way through the ships and get like our destroyer or corvette, wherever the maximum is, and feel we can take it into an area. Obviously I'd like to see wings properly done, because they're kind of a mess. Maybe they've sorted them out, but you should be able to basically bring a load of ships with you, so you can go into an enemy area and try and wipe them out. I don't think online is the route for Egosoft at all. I think that would cause the game to go spiraling out of control. If we look at something like Elite, online hasn't really had a positive effect in some respects. There's a lot of debate about player versus player. Myself, I'm not very keen player versus player. I'm more of a player versus enemy or environment such. So I don't think the online's a good idea for especially these type of games. I think it would kind of ruin it a bit, or ruin it more. It's probably the more correct thing to say. Like I said, basic variety is probably one of the biggest lacks of this. Definitely they should sign the files. I understand that they've made it very accessible for modders, but in some respects they should have some signature on the files to give themselves some sort of I don't know, some sort of like verification or something. I mean, although there's obviously should be support for mods and some, I don't know, there should be something between them anyway. I'm saying the stations and stuff, I don't think they're too bad. I don't like the little trade offers. It's missing the bulletin board, which is a shame. The docking, I think there should be proper docking bays rather than just jumping out the hatch and sort of wherever. And like I said, we don't necessarily need to walk around each station. Again, it depends on resources, but clearly if Egosoft haven't got the resources, don't spend a lot of time doing it. What else? I suppose they've implemented things like radar, but that was kind of something that should have been at the start, not added in later, but obviously now they would do that in the sequel. I think the other thing is the UI. I think it needs basically a big overhaul. I mean, for example, this is in 4K, and whilst this text is obviously quite readable, there is some text that is just purely barely readable, especially if you're probably watching this in 1080p. The first video I uploaded in 4K still doesn't seem to be rendered in 4K yet, so I'm not sure why it's taking so long, but maybe it's just YouTube. It's managed to do it in 1080p, so at least you can see it in that. Like I said, this is also going to be 4K, but again, I don't know when it's going to be rendered in time. I upload when I can and see how it goes. Yeah, so there's quite a few changes I'd like to see. I think in some respects they kind of need to look at their older game and see where it was there. Probably just one more thing I'd like to see, which is again probably a return from Albion Albatron, is the unfocused jump drive, which basically I think was a bit of a wasted opportunity by Egosoft. I think they could have used that to, what I did basically, I expanded the options that were available. You probably find after a very short amount of time that you get kind of the same crap over and over. The main focus was to basically get the Iran or something, which was a big ship, but what I've kind of expanded on that idea ages back was that, okay, you have this random idea and you jump to, but once you get this Iran, it disappeared and never come back. And what I thought is that you should have other ships there to claim and things like that. So there's obviously crates, ships, more enemies. I did put the cart back in as well. I would have liked to have seen a lot more varied stuff at a random jump thing, and then I expanded it, and it didn't. I didn't mention it about in the bonus thing, I think, of versions 3 or something, but I think it got rejected, the idea. But I thought personally it was a bit of a wasted opportunity. It could have been a lot more made, and I would like to see that in a future title. Basically, it's a bit like your loot finding in Diablo, where you kind of looking for a legendary or such. Maybe it's not a legendary, but it's a ship of some sort, or maybe it's a special weapon. Maybe it could be weapon parts or cargo. Maybe it could be people you save. Maybe you meet enemies. Like I said, maybe that's where you could meet your enemies. You could keep jumping to different random sectors and get a different outcome. Suddenly you might be placed in a really hostile area. So yeah, I'd like to see quite a few changes to a sequel. I mean, if they potentially release it just as is, it could, I feel, even more problems. Like I said, the engine itself, it's not too bad, I don't think now. 64-bit, which they needed at the start, because if they do a sequel, they're going to be using a lot more assets. They're going to be using more memory, and I think on launch it was using 3 gig, and the engine could only support up to 4 because it was 32-bit. Obviously now that's not a problem. DirectX 11 support, I mean, technically even that's getting old. I mean, we're moving on to DirectX 12, although a lot of new titles aren't picking that up. But I think pretty much X-Rebirth is based on DirectX 9, which, like I said, is still supported. But if they do a sequel to it, it's going to have to be shifted into DirectX 11, I think, soon. Egosoft is usually known to have pretty good graphics, so to be stuck on DirectX 9 is kind of a bit of a back issue. I don't think when you look at something like that, planet landing is necessarily important. Elite's tried it and I wouldn't say failed, but I would say it needs a lot more variety. It kind of sucks a bit in Elite when you can only go on 4 different planet types: ice, rock. Saying it, I don't know, but I don't think definitely that would be the route for Egosoft. I think that's just kind of crazy for them. They struggled to do the interiors, so doing things like planet landings would just be absolutely mad. Like you said, so yeah, basically expand the choices of the ships, make ships customizable, change systems, so instead of we having this highway that kind of looks stupid, kind of make it more feel open area. If you look at the kind of area, it's all kind of on one sort of plane. You know, the stations don't go particularly down, they go more or less across the area, so it's kind of like a 2D sort of map. I know it's 3D obviously, but just saying the areas don't vary. I mean, they should technically go sort of upwards and stuff. There should be systems with stations right up high and low and all over the place. So yeah, and like I said, the ships vary, customization, systems, maybe random events, random sectors so you can jump to later on. The plot obviously isn't major important, they spent too much on that. So yeah, there's quite a few things. I think if they did all that, I think they would have a pretty good title. Like I said, it's basically kind of for them is look at their X3 series and see why that did so well and borrow more from that, and like I said, ditch some of the things that they've come up with. Unfortunately, I mean, like the trading, it's just kind of stupid how it is now. I don't like the trading at all. So yeah, kind of go back to your era, improve things, make things more customizable, vary things, more than one player ship, open space up, don't bother with online, and probably don't bother with interiors. Maybe look at boarding interiors, but nothing really else. Anyway, guys, I thought I'd try and give you my idea of things I'd like changed. I was moaning at Egosoft in their development stage, but apparently I was told I was too late of giving them my ideas. I guess I was in the great scheme of things, but it's a shame that some of these things couldn't really be implemented. I feel like I said they kind of wasted time on some things that just didn't plainly work, and like I said, it's a shame. Anyway, guys, so hopefully that's helped explain why I was a bit pissed off with the franchise. It's gone. Hopefully they will kind of seriously look at things like this in a sequel if there is one. Now, guys, take care and have fun out there.